For more on the aftermath of the bloody coup, we're joined by Joshua Walker. He's a Transatlantic Fellow at the public policy think tank, the German Marshall Fund. Welcome back to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
In your estimation, is Gulen behind the failed coup?
You know, it's hard at this point in time. It's only less than 24 hours since this happened. It's hard to say one way or the other. Clearly, there are probably some elements of this, but as your report just indicated, this would be very strange. Gulen and the military have had a kind of a love-hate relationship from the beginning. Erdogan has been purging the military since he came to power back in 2003. So the idea that somehow the Gulen movement has kind of been colluding with the military seems less likely than there are certain elements or rogue elements within the military that are anti-Erdogan, just like Gulen has become anti-Erdogan.
What would be his motivation anyway?
I mean, he's kind of personal enemy number one of Erdogan. Despite being the closest of allies before 2013, they've really turned on each other. It seems to me that if there was any motivation, it'd be that there's been a reaction, counteraction on both sides to all the arguments that are going on. But when you have a legitimate government and you have a faith-based movement based out of the United States and a global movement, these don't necessarily kind of find themselves hand in hand.
Were you hearing rumblings of discontent within the military?
I think that everyone who's been into Turkey knows that there has always been some discontent, but nothing of the scale that we would have expected a coup. I think anybody who says they knew this was coming, that's a little bit far-fetched. This is surprising in terms of timing. The execution of it is even more striking. This is the second largest army of NATO, one of the most sophisticated military fighting forces on earth, and the way in which this played out has been ugly and unprofessional, to say the least.
Usually you first go after the president. They didn't go after Erdogan. They didn't have all the senior leaders of this military with them. Where were they going with this? What did they think they could accomplish?
Well, we'll have to find out, right? We still don't even know who the masterminds are behind this. The government has accused certain individuals. They put out a list of everyone. But the fact that they were not able to get Erdogan, and Erdogan has said they attacked his hotel where he was holidaying in Marmaris, and he got out just in time. Some have indicated that maybe they were planning, the military rogue elements were planning this, but somehow the other side got wind of it, and they had to move the timeline up. So when they took over the bridges from Europe to Asia, when they took over the airport, when they started bombing Parliament, the F-16s, I mean, this is something right out of a dystopian movie that's really hard for us to understand in this country.
And you can't sweep this anti-Erdogan sentiment under the rug. It's still there. Where does Erdogan go from here?
No, you're 100% right. One of the challenges is you hope that a tragedy of this type would bring everyone together. As you indicated, four opposition parties and Erdogan can't agree on anything, but they can agree that coup is a bad thing. But instead of bringing people together, it seems to me that this is going to only further polarize Turkey, which is exactly the opposite of what we need right now. We need stability in Turkey. Turkey's already been a victim of a series of terrorist attacks. This is only going to make the confidence the international community has in Turkey and its leadership even more fraught.
Does it affect the relationship with NATO at all in the fight against ISIL?
I think it is going to affect it in some ways. I don't think it's going to affect it in the same way that many are thinking. Some have said, oh, maybe there was some type of ISIS elements within the military. Anybody who knows the Turkish military knows that that's the furthest thing from the truth in terms of the most secular group of individuals you've ever met. They clearly, if they were acting in this way, were not acting on behalf of the entire military. There are divisions within the military. That's really important. The fact that not a single top general would come out. And in fact, they did the opposite. Top generals came out and said, this is not us. We're not doing this. And the relative quickness with which this coup was put down is an indicator of the fact that we're going to have to find some way to move forward with that military.
Is he viewed as a dictator to some, even though he was democratically elected?
I think in the West in particular, there's been a real strong bias against Erdogan from the very beginning. Given that, I don't really know where he goes. How is he going to convince anyone of something different? Because I think there's an opportunity here to be conciliatory. That doesn't seem to be Erdogan's personality. When you saw the defiance of coming back and saying, this was a gift from God and we're going to fight back and we're going to bring everyone to justice, that plays really well with his supporters. It doesn't play as well with the non-supporters. And I think particularly among NATO, European allies, and the United States, it's a very difficult balancing act because we want to support the democratic institutions, the democratic elected leader, but we also want those leaders to show restraint and have kind of the basic rule of law, which I hope is continuing even at this late hour.
All righty, Joshua Walker, thank you with the German Marshall Fund. Always good to see you.